Kalau misalnya dari 3B kalau dari usaha
Cek. Kenapa beres ya?
Bawa ini ya satu ya.
Ada perlu pakai mic lagi. Pakai dua atau satu? Kayaknya ini aja sih. Oke. Kayaknya agak tanggung ini. Nggak ada speaker lagi. Oh bisa.
I'm just curious. Exactly. For now, I see that it has to be Brownbag.
Well, we need to hear your voice for
Okay.
the live streaming, so you need to put this.
Where should I put it? Well, you put it. Yeah. Will you do it for me?
I'm sorry.
No.
Is it kamu tulis?
For me, it's okay. But how is my voice? Is it okay, or do you know it? Can you give me a sign if everything is okay? I don't have to raise my voice. No, I can just talk normally. Okay, so people, if I talk like this, it will not be audible for the people in the back, I think, right? Okay. Yeah. Like.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our Brownbag talk, number 56 today.
No.
So before we start our discussion, do you mind, to fill in the empty seats first in the front so we can see, your face, your beautiful faces, happy faces, easy to engage during the discussion. Yeah, our friends from the Philippines can come in front.
Guest of honor.
The Philippines continental. Okay, so I'm Mia Daliana, a lecturer in Faculty of Social Sciences. So today, if you attend Brownbag very often, then you know that today's topic is kind of special, right? This is the multidisciplinary path where you use the knowledge for any interest you have in the discipline. Let's say politics, IR, cultural, anthropological, sociology, and even Islamic studies. So I am so thrilled that today we have Professor Edwin Wieringa from University of Cologne, Germany. He is a professor with expertise of Indonesian philologists. So when you hear about this, philologist basically is the primary source for any kind of history, right? The mother of knowledge. He studied manuscripts, right? He studied text, folklore, concentrating from the Indonesian region. Also Malaysia, he studied diasporas, and of course all of the knowledge that he has produced basically is what being taken by power, in our country. So that's why you call it political identity, right? So this depends on where this discussion goes. So today we have students from Islamic studies, and also political science and international relations.
Right.
So without further ado, I would like to give you the time.
Okay.
to deliver this interesting topic.
Hopefully.
So you have
I know.
We
told
start
me.
with discussion.
You
So
start-
this discussion is very light.
You start with grilling.
Really?
Grilling me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, did I roasted it?
Okay.
This is my place.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, thank you very much, Ibu Nia, for the invitation. Hello, everyone. What Ibu Nia was saying, I've done a lot of things, but in other words, that also means that I'm quite old. I mean, it has been done over the years. And just to give you a little bit of background information about myself. It's true, I'm a professor of Indonesian philology in combination with Islamic studies at the University of Cologne. I started out as a philologist, which means basically, in Indonesia, philology is mostly defined as the study of manuscripts, a handwritten text. But philology is, if you take another definition, a European definition, it is about the study of text, written text. And that is mainly what I've been doing for the better part of my life. And that is the way I earn a living. Now, for today I have prepared a presentation. It is about research interests about which I'm working, and the first is there are two topics which I would like to discuss today, and it is all about Islam in everyday life, and that is a topic which is not, I think, normally studied by many academics, because what is the interest of Western academics? Mostly it is about politics, economics, and also, of course, from the angle of security studies. The idea Islam in Indonesia, Indonesia is the largest Islamic country in the world. Could Indonesia potentially be a threat? So that's also an angle which is very current in publications nowadays. What I do is something else. It is about Islam in everyday life. I mean, how Muslims live their life in Indonesia. What I would like to talk about today are two topics. You see one and one. That's because I'm in Indonesia with gaptek. That is, I'm hopeless with technology. But it is one and two. Please bear with me. The first subject is about experience with the Hajj and Indonesian identity, and I will try to show that Indonesian identity gradually developed. The second topic of my talk is something completely different. It is about images of hell in popular comics during New Order Indonesia. So it's completely different, but on the other hand, the two topics are also related in the way that it is about Islam as lived in Indonesia over the last years. Now, first of all, experience with the Hajj and Indonesian identity. Of course, this has to do with, on the one hand, Indonesians, or let me put it this way, people from a country which is nowadays called Indonesia, and the global world, the Ummah. The Hajj, of course, the fifth pillar of Islam, that Muslims should one day in their life gather in the holy place of Mecca. Now, the relation between quote-unquote Indonesia, which this is a word which I don't really like to use in the first few slides, because this is still in a pre-modern days. And the example is from a Malay language manual from Nuruddin Araniri, Sirat al-Mustaqim, which was written by him in the 17th century at the court of Aceh. And this was at a time, I would like to emphasize this, there was no Indonesia yet. There was not really an Indonesian identity. So this is a manual written by someone from what we now say India, South Asia, in the Malay language. And this is a handbook on fiqh. And it also shows how strongly Islam at this point was connected to quote-unquote the Arab world. Just an example. In this book, Sirat al-Mustaqim, Nuruddin also discusses food. What food resources are there for a Muslim? Halal, haram, because you can't eat everything, of course. And then you would think, well, we are in Aceh, we are in Southeast Asia, and, well, as you know yourself, there is a rich tropical local fauna as a food resource. But not at all, it is completely ignored. And Nuruddin Ranidi, eating a camel is permissible, halal, a giraffe is haram. Now, this is of course very theoretical. I mean, imagine yourself being in Aceh. Have you ever seen a giraffe? Do you know what a camel is? I mean, in Aceh? Not at all, yeah, in a zoo nowadays. But at that time, it was completely theoretical. And then in the 18th century, the book by Nuruddin Araniri was considered outdated. The language was not really understood anymore. And an ulama, an alim, Muhammad Arshad al-Banjari, was commissioned with the task of updating and to rewrite this handbook. And what he did was to clarify various points in the Sirat al-Mustaqim. And what he did was he quoted several sayings of the Prophet Muhammad about the superiority of the Arabs, and the learned commentator recommends, if you're in doubt, if you don't know what is halal or haram, you should do as the Arabs do, emulating their ways, including their food ways. If you see an Arab eating something, you know, okay, this is halal, this is permissible, and so the point of reference is do as the Arabs do. And this is something, I just picked it out of internet, from social media some years ago. It is a joke, of course. In my translation, if you quarrel with your sweetheart, don't use coarse language. Please use Arabic so that your quarrel will be blessed. It is a joke, but as in any joke, there is a certain kernel of truth in it, which also shows that Arabic has a special place. Why? Well, of course, Arabic is a holy language because it is the language of Al-Quran, and that is, of course, God's word. Now, you would think that pilgrims to Mecca from Southeast Asia would be thrilled, would be passionate, going, of course, to Mecca. This is, the heartland of Islam. This is where Islam originated. And then they could experience also authentic Arabic food. You could also say, this is the food which the Prophet Muhammad also had. But if you look at modern-day Indonesian description of the Hajj, they are invariably negative about Arabic cuisine. They say, well, it doesn't really conform to Indonesian taste. Nowadays, they say, well, it has become much more easy than in former days, because now you can eat Indonesian food in Mecca, and there's no problem for Indonesians mingling with other Muslims, but still feeling as Indonesians in Mecca. Now, why do I emphasize the idea of food? Because there's a well-known saying, I quote it here, it is quoted all the time by academics on gastro-nationalism. This is, tell me what you eat and I will tell you what you are. Because food very much signifies yourself and distinguishes from others. Well, consider, for example, halal and haram. I mean, if you say, I only eat halal food, this signifies that you're a Muslim, and that makes you different from people who are non-Muslims. And there's a great pride in all these descriptions. Over the years, I have collected a number of books on descriptions of the Hajj from Indonesians, and I noticed a great pride in Indonesian foodways. They said, well, we have our own food, and we are very we are very happy to have this. But this is, I think, a very modern phenomenon, because I only noticed it in modern descriptions of the Hajj. And this is, I think, very much intimately linked to the idea of Indonesia. We Indonesians like Indonesian food. And that is something which we do not encounter before, I would say, in any case, before the 20th century, and it's a rather late phenomenon. Let's go back in time. Now we are used to many people performing the Hajj. Every year in news bulletins you can see pictures of enormous numbers of people gathering in Mecca. But you should remember, in the 19th century the numbers of pilgrims was only very small. The total number in 1853, for example, is estimated, I have to repeat, estimated at about 50,000. Only around about 1,000 Indonesian pilgrims were part of that. And then you see, you can have a look at the slide yourself, I won't read it out here, but you can see the enormous development, starting out with only a little more than 1,000 Indonesian pilgrims in the middle of the 19th century. Nowadays, the numbers are hundreds of thousands, and the total number of people runs in the millions of people. So it is a mass, it has become a mass phenomenon. This, of course, has to do with modern developments, also a very everyday phenomenon, is transport. How do you get from Indonesia to Mecca? Well, until the 60s, mostly people used ship. Only since the 1970s, aeroplane became dominant, and nowadays the flight Jakarta-Jeddah, I think it's about 9 hours, so it's very doable. And that is, I think, also something which we have to realize, that in former days, people had to use months before they could come to Mecca, and they also stayed long in Mecca. Nowadays, it's a question of a few hours, and it is said that Indonesian pilgrims usually merely stay for about 30 to 40 days in Saudi Arabia, so it's very much shortened. Now, luckily, there has been research on this topic. Henri Chamberlain has edited 3 volumes of text on the Hajj, and these are narratives from the period 1482 until 1964, so 3 volumes. And let me briefly go through these 3 volumes. The first volume describes the years 1482-1890, more than 5 centuries. But we see that pilgrimage is still a rarity in this period. There are very few accounts in more than 500 years, and foodways hardly play a role. There are no words spent on what people had for dinner in Mecca. And the oldest experiences are very legendary. Just one example. According to a Mecca Cerise hagiography of Muhammad Yusuf al-Makassari, the luminary allegedly once met his mentor, Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, and shared a meal with him in Mecca. Now, as a historian of the more, let's say, the positivistic inclination, you would say that's impossible, because Abdul Qadir al-Jilani already died 500 years earlier. So how could he have shared a meal with him? It is, of course, something which should be read symbolically. This anecdote highlights the close relation between the 2 mystics. And in the earlier periods, and I now immediately move to the 18th and 19th century, which also shows that there's very little written by people from Southeast Asia on the Hajj in former centuries. And in the description from the 18th and 19th centuries, Mecca is described as a faraway fairyland. Very praiseworthy poems about the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, and Mecca is described as heaven on earth. Let me give an example. A bit of exoticism also, of uncommon Arabic names for that time, I mean. In my translation, there are many fruits in Mecca. You may choose delicious and beautiful ones. All sorts of figs and apples, pomegranates from God's tree, and also dried dates and ripe dates, from the date palm, raisins, and jujube. And I've, between the brackets, you see the Arabic names. And I think at this time, this is around the middle of the 19th century, for the readers of this text, these were still very uncommon phenomenon. I mean, you also should remember that this is something which for most people at that time was still very exotic. Nowadays you can go to the supermarket and buy these things, but at that time it was very exotic. And in these poems, the writers urge their readers, well, it is so wonderful, I don't have words for it, you should see for yourself. It's all very enthusiastic. Here also, tropes of glorification of Mecca. When the rains fall from the sky, crowds of people fall down. Any amount of water received will heal the body, cure the illnesses. And also, drinking the blessed water from the Zamzam, well, not only has healing benefits, but also affects spiritual lives. This is really heaven on earth. But we should remember, at this time, there were no Indonesians yet. And I quote from the beginning of Robert Elson's book on the idea of Indonesia, the first page. Let me quote it. Before the 20th century, there was no Indonesia and there's no Indonesians. In the archipelago that stretched between continental Asia and Australia, states abounded. some loosely articulated but slowly gathering Dutch imperial power, but localism remained the predominant motive of political and cultural identity. So, no Indonesians. The group of people from Southeast Asia shared certain similarities, and they were called the Jawa. The Jawa were the people coming from insular Southeast Asia. That means the region which we now call Indonesia, but also Malaysia, of course, also Singapore, southern Thailand, southern Philippines. So it is, that we could also say, broadly speaking, the Malay-speaking world, Indonesia plus, if you want. These are some quotations from Suker Gronje, who was the infamous Dutch Orientalist who was in Arabia in the 19th century and who has written, he was also very interested, of course, in the Malays who stayed in Mecca at that time. Now, the years 1900, 1950, we only find 8 accounts. And then there is an awareness of Indonesian identity. This is, of course, after Indonesian independence, and Kiai Haji Abdul Samad in 1948 described a hotel in Muna owned by an Indonesian, kepunyaan orang Indonesia. This is also a new term, orang Indonesia, an Indonesian. There's also an Indonesian restaurant with the Indonesian flag atop and a portrait of Bung Karno on the wall. And then they have dishes like sate padang, gado-gado Jakarta, tutu banja, so all dishes from Indonesia. And then, for example, Buya Mahamka in 1950 notices that since Indonesian independence, among the Mukimin, who mostly live like Arabs, there is a sense of pride among their former fatherland. There is an enthusiasm for their old fatherlands. For decades there were the Jawa who eat snakes, negative described by Mexicans, and now they say we are Indonesians, not Jawa. There's also something like, what is it with Jawa, Jawi, Indonesia? Not all people were very happy with this term. For example, especially for people from Minangkabau, this was said to be degrading because in the Minangkabau language, Jawi means cow, so it's not very complimentary. So we see then a sense of Indonesians, but still there are differences. And there's an anecdote which I culled from a book by Rosian Anwar, and he talked with a rich man from Palembang who said that nowadays the Hajj is different from earlier time. This is, I mean, post-independence Indonesia. He performed the Hajj 4 times Indonesians, but I'm not so sure that Mecca Ceres have the same tongue as people from Palembang or from still Indonesians, but there are local differences. This is also, I think, quite interesting, found by a film director who wrote about his pilgrimage in 1964. And then you also see that the ticket to the Holy Land was for him like a ticket to heaven. He describes it as that, a ticket to heaven. Why? Because he felt like one of God's chosen, knowing that only 15,000 people were privileged to go each year. Imagine that. I mean, nowadays, hundreds of thousands of people go to Mecca. In 1964, there were only 15,000 people who were privileged to do this. It was really a great privilege to be, you could also say, Misbah Yusabisan also described that you can eat Indonesian food, but this is from a food booth run by people from Patani, South Thailand, who spoke Malay. Now, quick forward. I said in my former slide that you felt like one of God's chosen. It was an enormous privilege to get a ticket to Mecca. And now, what you see now, in the 21st century, you have this television series, Tukang Bubur Naik Haji. So I chose, I adapted the slogan of, EasyJet, and now everyone can fly. It is as if now everyone can perform the Hajj. no matter. I mean, even if you're poor, it doesn't matter. Everyone can make it. And there's a number of books about this. Miraculous stories, which I think are more in the believe it or not category. For example, tukang becak pun bisa naik haji. Kisah-kisah ajaib, well, miraculous stories, and I very much believe that. I mean, you all know how much does a pedicab driver earn, and how much can he put aside. But in any case, this is also very much emphasized in books about the Hajj in Indonesia, that they say, well, you can go with only a few rupiah to Mecca. What's the trick? Well, you see it here. Just every day you put coins in a box, and after a few years, there you have your ticket to Mecca, if you believe it. There are many books about the pilgrimage, and let me just focus on a few of them. There's a very famous one, Orang Jawa naik haji, by what's his name? Orang Jawa naik haji, a Javanese makes the pilgrimage. Sorry? Danarto, sorry, yeah. I'm already old, so I forget names. Danarto, yeah, that's the name. A famous writer, and he also set a new form, so a more personalized description of the pilgrimage. And then you have, for example, also Orang Batak naik haji. So not only Javanese make the pilgrimage, but also Batak. And what I find interesting in this book is about, well, he described that when he was still a child, that is the 1950s and early 1960s, pilgrims had to bring their own food and cooking utensils. In that period, pilgrims still traveled by boat, or by ship, I should say, and could bring a lot with them. Nowadays, in the era of the airplane, pilgrims still took supermi, sambal, salted fish, etc. with them, although all of this was available in Saudi Arabia. And the author mentioned several food stalls and their prices. And together with his wife, Ari Tonang, this Batak who made the pilgrimage, also tried Arab food, but apparently it was not a great success. Although the place was full with visitors from the Middle East and Africa, it was not tasty at all. And then we have to think, what is happening here? On the one hand, this man who describes himself as a Batak, he very much emphasizes that he is from the Batak ethnic. And he visited, together with his wife, an Arabic restaurant, which is full with visitors from the Middle East and Africa, but not tasty for Indonesians. In other words, it's a popular choice from people from the heartlands of Islam, but not so for Indonesians. And then my question is, what is it that determines the taste for some foods over others? And this is very much has to do with this thing between our food and their food. And you could say, well, taste is primarily about class and an affirmation of class boundaries, but you could also say, well, it has to do with national identities. But you have to think about that too. I mean, what distinguishes one group from another? Ari Tonang emphasizes again and again that he's a Batak, that he craves for Indonesian food. He never says, I like Batak food. No, he always says, masakan Indonesia. So it's a much broader concept. And then he also says that one of the most popular food stalls in Mecca advertised with big letters, Warung Indonesia. However, he added his sellers are not from Indonesia. They are from Thailand. They are from Patani. Indonesian, tetapi penjualnya orang Thailand, persisnya orang Patani. And this, I think, raises larger questions worth rethinking. I mean, what is this Warung Indonesia? It's advertised as such, but behind it are people from another region, from Patani. But this is not commented upon in the book at all. So these, I think, are larger questions worth rethinking, but they are not commented upon in the book itself. But in any case, what I've noticed in modern books about the description of the Hajj is the refrain is that food should not be too foreign. This also has to do, I think, with the fact that Indonesian pilgrims nowadays only stay for a limited period in Mecca, so their experience with a foreign country is rather limited. And why should you take a risk? I mean, okay, if you will stay in a country for many years, you have to adapt, and then you have to make good of the situation as you find it, because you have to live there for a longer period. But in this case, you only live, I think, for about 30 days at the most in Saudi Arabia. The Hajj proper could be done in only 1 week, and the remaining time could be used for shopping and collecting souvenirs. That's not what I'm saying, that's what I found in his book by Halim Ibn Hafiz, Tips Praktisch Umrah dan Haji, Kiat Hidup Sehari-hari di Tanah Suci. And there are all kinds of practical tips, for example, to stay safe during the ritual of stoning the devil, so you shouldn't be at the front, because otherwise you could be hit by a stone from someone in the back. And also you have to be careful of pickpockets in Mecca. The idea that Mecca is a holy city, yes, but also pickpockets. Not all people in Mecca are holy people. And there's always, in all these books, I found this a special section on food. And the emphasis is always on Indonesian food. It is said, okay, if you want to try Arab specialities, they can have attractive names, but yeah, you better not use them because you won't like it. And also the idea, bring your own food. By the way, this is also a gender thing. There is a difference between descriptions written by males and by females. And I have now a book by Dr. Rana Hajjah Siti Nurdayat, Persiapan Berhaji bagi Wanita, so especially written for women. And she said, well, bring some food along because Arab food is boring. It's also a motive which you find again and again, so Arab food is not tasty at all. So bring your own food, pop mie instan, bubur instan, abon, kering tempe, balado, sambal pecel, ketchup. On the other hand, it's also some supermarkets are said to have everything needed for Indonesian pilgrims. So why should you bring lots of super mie in your bags? There is a gender issue here, books written specifically for women, but there's also, I think, a social class issue. Let me see, I can skip this, it's not so important for me, yeah. Here I have a good example of class difference. This is by Susi Asahari, Pengalaman Asia Perempuan Pergi Berhaji. Again, right? I mean, the experience of a woman, perempuan. And she says, she writes it in English, take your own food? No way. She said, for those in 4- or 5-star hotels, meals are prepared 3 times a day. Others can choose from dishes by Indonesian food sellers. So, this I quote from her book, so the taste of that dish is guaranteed to be in accordance with Malay tongs. And then she also said, well, there are only 30 to 40 days during which one has to miss one's own home cooking. So, no big deal. And this, I think, this is a very much a class aspect. This is a representative from the affluent class who is used to live in 4- or 5-star hotels, not only in Mecca, but also in New York, in Paris. So, this person isn't really bothered with international food at all. I mean, it's the same about everywhere, and also, of course, of high quality. There's also a culture shock, which is described in these descriptions. I won't go into that. Also, a test of patience, that it is said, well, you will be tested in Mecca, but again and again, food is an issue, but you don't have to worry about it. I also found this about a criticism of modern phenomenon, about tourism in Mecca, a comic, Islam Sehari-hari, so everyday Islam, And there you have a couple, husband and wife, who want to be photographed, and I have translated the captions. Both towers have to be visible. That's the man who is speaking here. Both towers have to be visible, so the location near the Masjid al-Haram is clear. Nice picture, take 20 pictures if needed. And he wants to hang it in the living room and also upload it to Facebook. So it's very important to have pictures of Mecca. This is about Mecca as a tourist. Say, what is here the religious aspect of performing the Hajj? You could also say, well, you could also be in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. I mean, what is here the religious aspect? Now, there is no place like home. And as I've said, the Hajj has drastically changed in the last decades in the age of mass commercial air travel. Since the 1990s, hundreds of thousands of Indonesian pilgrims travel to Mecca by plane and only stay for a relatively short time. With food, necessary for survival, and also the size of price, Indonesian food could be related to comfort eating. Now, I have been thinking about this. Why is it that in Indonesian travel accounts nowadays there's so much attention to Indonesian food? Is this something specifically Indonesian, or does it have to do with, I think, with tourism? Just an idea. So, is it typically Indonesian or just touristy? And I came to that because I saw an advert. I'm Dutch. By the way, I work in Germany, but I'm a native Dutch. And I saw an advertisement for a holiday in Turkey. And this was advertised as a hotel. This is in Turkey, so for Dutch tourists, a foreign experience, of course. But on the other hand, relax. It is not so exotic as you perhaps fear, because look at here, the food is all Dutch, and you can also drink, in Dutch it is delicious Dutch coffee. I mean, what is delicious Dutch coffee? What's wrong with Turkish coffee? But it's the idea, it's an advertisement, of course. You also should look at the prices, which are quite tempting to go there. But the idea is you can go abroad, but still be safe. You don't have to adapt that much. And that's the idea I also think about performing the pilgrimage to Mecca for Indonesians, the comforting idea that, okay, this is a rather, perhaps a strange experience, but on the other hand, you are comfortable because it will not last very long, and most of it is still like home. So you're abroad, but there are many things which still are comforting for you. Now that was my first topic, and I'm still working on it, and I hope someday I can make an article out of it. And I'm very happy if you would share your thoughts about what I've presented now. And I can have your feedback. It would be very welcome. Now, a second topic, which is very much, the first topic was about Indonesian experience with the outside world, Indonesians going abroad, meeting the Ummah, but still staying within their own group, because that's also, I think, a phenomenon in these Indonesian descriptions. You hardly find experiences of Indonesians mingling with Muslims from other regions. They stay in groups together, Indonesian groups, they have their own guides, and there's hardly any exchange as far as I can see from the descriptions. I mean, personal experiences may be different, of course, but I'm basing myself on written accounts which I have collected over the years. Now, my second topic is much more inward looking. It is also about everyday life in Indonesia, an aspect which is neglected in academic research, namely comics, because comics are still by most academics considered as, well, children's literature. So a serious academic will not take this as a topic for research. It's not considered a very serious thing. But I think it is. And let's have a look at these comics. And here you see some of these comics. Siksa Neraka. I should have given a trigger warning because it will be quite gory. So if you would like to leave the room, please do now. I have other slides which are even more sadistic, so bear with me. And you also see other things, right? I mean, it is about horror. Here you see Satan, of course, but also here with humor here and kuntilanak, horror. So it is more or less religious comics, but also very much connected to horror stories. And I wanted to connect it, and I've written about this. This is something which I wrote an article about. It will come out, hopefully, inshallah, at the end of this year. This is in a book on body, identity and society in Islam. Body, because Siksa Neraka, these are bodily tortures, also with identity. It has very much to do with Indonesian identity, also with Indonesian society. And in these comics we find a rich imagery of all sorts of bodily tortures experienced by sinners in hell. And you also have it very specialized comics. So you have comics on adulterers, comics for thieves. So every category, you could say, has its own kind of torture. And this is, I think, closely connected. I mean, the golden years of these comics were during the authoritarian New Order regime. And why is that? And I hope to make it clear why these comics had their golden period during the end of the authoritarian New Order regime. The question is, during the New Order regime, there was a very strict censorship. You couldn't publish what you wanted. There was no freedom of the press. But how come that these comics were allowed? And I will go back to the other slide. If you see this, it's not only quite sadistic to look at, but all these people, and this is also, of course, a kind of torture, are naked. Because this is also, the sinners are put to shame. But as you know, the New Order regime was very harsh on pictures of naked persons. So how come that these comics were allowed to be published and to and even promoted? Who were the readers of these comics? Well, at these times, baca al-Islami untuk madrasah, sekolah dasar dan umum. So younger people were supposed to read these books. It's a kind of black pedagogy to teach young children good morals. Now, you could say the 1970s and 1990s were the golden age of local comics in Indonesia, cheap booklets aimed at a young audience. Only the cover was colored, the rest was in black and white, and the paper was of newspaper quality, not very cheap, of course, and the quality was also quite inferior. We should remember that this is the pre-internet age and also pre-screen entertainment. After the 1990s, these local comics lost their popularity, and if we look at comics, we see, if you only have a look nowadays in local bookshops in Indonesia, you will see American and Japanese comics, manga, and also Indonesian adaptations of manga. The Japanese comics are very popular, and I was here for a few days, and I went to the local Gramedia in Depok. I didn't find any books on Siksa Neraka, unfortunately. But luckily I already had my own collection, so I didn't worry about that. So what's the broader framework? The broader framework is mostly the night journey and the heavenly ascent. So with Gabriel as a companion, the Prophet Muhammad visits heaven, but it's also shown what hell looks like. So there you have, you could say, a religious framework for showing the catalogue of corporal punishment for sinners. So, and here I show you some slides. They are quite brutal. The Prophet sees people being tortured in hell. Here, I said there are all kinds of groups, fornicators and thieves. And what I find interesting from that point of view is a special category, which I would call a very special Indonesian category, namely with the Indonesian name of corruptor. Corruptor. So, someone who is corrupt. This category is very much singled out also in these comics. Here you also see it, people being transformed into pigs. Let me have a look. People who, orang yang semasa hidupnya di dunia suka minum minuman keras, arak, whisky dan sebangsanya, makan makanan haram. Here we have my favorite topic again, food, but of course the haram kind of food. And then, well, if you have done such a sin, then you will get these. Also, by the way, this one, oh, okay, I have to show it here. You see what this is? Yeah. And that's, I think, quite a modern invention, but on the other hand, it is an old-fashioned kind of instrument. This is also appalling, of course. So burning someone, but this punishment goes on and on and on. You know about eternity, right? I mean, there's no end. It's hardly imaginable. I mean, something which does never end. Here also punishment for not fasting, people who did not during the month of Ramadan fast. Well, you can see how they will enjoy the afterlife. Also, and this is, I think, also a kind of a black pedagogy, I noticed that there are no children in hell. So in this comic, although these comics are intended to be read by children, there are no pictures of children who are tortured, luckily, I think, because that is, of course, a very traumatic experience for a young child to imagine that. But on the other hand, they are warned, those who are insurgent against parents, durhaka, who are disobedient, will also get their pay in hell. And here we have a thing which comes back again and again, repeated amputation of hands, thieves, robbers, blackmailers, burglars, bandits, and again, corruptor. Again and again, the category of corruptor, they are very much punished in hell. Now I said the framework is mostly set that the Prophet Muhammad sees all these tortures in hell. There's also another framework, and that's the framework of the two roads, heaven and hell. And there are two characters, Karma and Saleh. I mean, no man as omen. So the names already explain what kind of character they are. Saleh, of course, a very pious young man. Karma is the one who, well, gets his karma. So these are the prototype for later comics. These are from the 1960s. And the plot is basically this. Karma is born into a rich family. Saleh, in other version he's called Hassan, is born into a poor family. So you also have this class phenomenon. Rich man, poor man. Rich, associated with sin. Why is he born in a rich family? Where does this riches come from? And not only that, this is earthly riches, dunyawi, with Saleh, the pious family, is poor, but are very pious. They are a very religious family. And you see that Karma lives the life of a playboy, he likes alcohol, loose women, going to parties, he does everything that religion forbids. On the other hand, Hassan al-Saleh is a very pious man, and you could also almost say he lives as an ascetic. And this is also this is 1960s, the Sukarno era, but also about the criticism that Karma is a selfish, arrogant brat, a criticism of the rich upper class. And then we have a variety on a theme: siksa neraka, siksa bagi mereka yang tidak puasa, siksa bagi ahli selingkuh, siksa bagi para pelacur. Every category has its own tortures in hell. And I was tempted to think about this, but I'm not sure if I'm right, to think about a Christian prototype, because there's a well-known idea in Christianity and also in missionary posters about the roads to heaven and hell, the two roads, one which leads to hell, which is the way of luxury, the other way goes to heaven, but it's the difficult road during life. When I did my research, I found it very difficult to find background information on the people who were behind it, who were the writers, who were the people who made these pictures. I almost found nothing. There is a man called M.B. Rahimshah. I only had this photo from the internet, but unfortunately I don't know anything about him. And that's also, I think, a lack of research. So there's almost no research at all on this topic. Perhaps because it is considered too childish, I don't know. Menakutkan, yeah, memang, yeah, it's terrifying. But I think that's also a reason why it should be studied. What we see are individuals who have committed minor offenses who are condemned to eternal damnations, and they become horrific sufferings. What we also see are modern phenomena. Yeah, okay, yeah. Drug addiction, which is of course a very modern phenomenon, narcoba, and the dire consequences of bad behavior are shown. So this is, I would say, frightening children into good behavior. If they read this, they should know, be careful, because later, after you have died, you will come in hell, and you will be tortured for what you have done during your lifetime. So it's a kind of moral catechism, a general condemnation of sins, not fulfilling religious duties, fornication, thieving, a list of don'ts. So don't do this, don't do that, otherwise hell will be your place. So on the one hand, the religious aspect, on the other hand, societal issues. The class differences, rich, poor. The poor are always portrayed as good, pious people. The rich upper class are seen as potential citizens of hell. An emphasis also on corruption. This has very much to do with Indonesia at that time. I mean, you all know the statistics. Indonesia is always very good on the point of corruption. I mean, it's always on the top of statistics on corruption. This is, of course, a major societal issue, and this is indirectly addressed in these comics. Also, another thing, the abuse of drugs, narcotica and obat terlarang, narcotics, psychotropics, and addictive substances. But what you find is no thematization of poverty, no thematization of inequality. I mean, okay, there is a gap between rich and poor, but this is not addressed as such. It is taken for granted. There's a misery of many people, a low life expectancy, a corrupt government and bureaucracy, but they are all more or less portrayed as something, well, this is a fact of life. And there's no targeting of drug addiction as a serious health and societal problem. This is, and I must say, I was struck by this because I'm, of course, a foreign observer. Drug addiction in the West is seen as an illness, not so much as a sin. But in these comics, drug addiction is seen as a religious sin. And that's, of course, quite different from other perspectives. So what are we seeing here? Are we seeing sinful individuals, or are we dealing with a dysfunctional society? That's, I think, quite a difference. Now, let's look at the time, and I think these comics, especially from the 1990s, they were very popular at the time. This was very timely because this coincides with the 1990s. It was the final years of the Suharto years, which was marked by rampant corruption. Here I have a slide about Pak Harto, a special report, how Indonesia's longtime boss built a family fortune. This was at that time very much thematized. Corruption, KKN, if you still remember perhaps, was the the buzzword of those years. So this has very much to do with New Order politics. On the one hand, an emphasis on religious education, Islam, also anti-communist ideology, and a strict censorship setting. Now I will come to my close, and I think I have 2 minutes. Okay, I think I don't need 2, I need 1. Okay, so let me wrap this up. What I see is something like reimagining hell. I mean, there have over many centuries, people have imagined what it is to what hell is, and this is one of the imaginings. And this is an image of the period, I would say almost a mirror image of the final years of the New Order. It is a creative response to an oppressive social conditions in Islamic lexicon. Why is this? Why are these Islamic comics? Because that, at that time, was the only possible outlet at the time. I mean, if you want to criticize the Indonesian government, it was not possible. You would end up in jail. The only way to voice a different opinion than the government was to use religious discourse. Divisions among class was, for example, also a taboo topic. In the comics, you find a sharp criticism of rich and poor, but in a very religious discourse, not in a communist discourse. So you could say this is also a useful safety valve, letting off steam without disturbing or provoking, giving voice to social and political frustrations without harming the governments. So there was no essential, so this is a very safe way of letting off steam, and also not addressing societal issues, but blaming individuals. So it is one person, oknum, one person who is responsible for corruption, not the government as a whole. No, it is one bad apple, not the government as such. So you could also say, is this a kind of opium for the people, acceptance of social conditions by promising rewards in the hereafter? Well, perhaps it is. I mean, that you say, well, just be patient, sabarlah aja, tunggu aja. In the end, there will Judgment Day, and then we will see who will come up and who will. Okay, that's from me. I think I've taken up the 2 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Yes.
Very interesting discussion on the presentation. We heard about the role of food as in everyday life, or people in Indonesia, transforming culturally to the 20th century. The function and the role in the time from the fact that we have Islamic civilization through the identity of Mary to be some kind of, new kind of definition built through the understanding of state identity in 20th century, especially it goes along with the transformation of the titles in the meaning of the need, right? Especially when globalization really South Asia, there was Mecca, right? The journey to Mecca. So yeah, it's interesting to know, right, how food can become an object of research and build theories and concepts, and you build something, to give a new meaning to food. And for the next, for the topic after that, I think it's really interesting, and it's so much related between our digital identity that we see all the time, and especially in the election, with the fact that it's kind of the routine. Not only during this part of Europe, there is a kind of routine where religious region and communism, right, and social media, this really has been playing continuously, shaping Indonesian politics too. Yeah. So, okay, if you have some questions, we can open now time for you to ask. Okay, we have from one student here, Arara, and we can go to Paan. So Arara is our student in political science, PhD student.
Okay.
He's from Armenia.
Okay.
A Christian, so maybe he's gonna help something with the
Okay, but the background is not important for me. If someone is Christian or Hindu or whatever, it's
See something.
Yeah, of course.
Sounds good.
Identity, because myself, in my thesis, I'm trying to do that. I'm doing on complementarity theory between Christian minority and Muslim majority. I will compare Indonesia with Syria, subnational. My question is, doesn't emphasizing on Indonesian food or even Batak food, or if you want Sumatra food, for example, to what extent has nationalistic or local nationalism in that? Because I want to make a comparison with Lebanese food, for example. In Middle East, nearly in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Syria, the food is pretty the same. I would say 99.9% is the same food.
I know.
But we call it in general Middle Eastern food or Arabic food.
Yes.
But Lebanese call it Lebanese food.
Of course.
And the coffee also. Although it's Arabic, the coffee came from Ethiopia and etc. Arabs never call Arabic food, but Arabic coffee, but Turks all the time emphasize Turkish coffee, even though it's the same thing. So to what extent, besides religion, in this term Islam, does nationalism as an feeling of Indonesian plays a role in this? That was my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. And you raise an important point. I mean, you could also ask yourself, how much has this to do with religion at all? I mean, of course, it has to do with religion because this is about Indonesians performing the Hajj. I mean, how religious can you get? But on the other hand, and also, of course, it is about halal food, of course. But on the other hand, but you said, you mentioned a number of examples, and I think that's pretty much the kernel of, that's, I think, this, at the center of attention here, because you mentioned Middle Eastern food, but you also know, for example, I would almost say the battle about hummus. Exactly. I mean, there is a huge debate going on. I mean, it's more about who invented this food, right? I mean, the original. They say, well, the Israelis did it.
Lately there is a debate of Israel.
Exactly. I mean, and that's also about we did it. We were the first. And with Indonesian food, you said, but no, never. I mean, I gave this example of a man who very much says, I'm a Batak, I'm an ethnic Batak. Again and again, he stresses his Batak identity. That's obviously very important for him. But when he's in Mecca, he doesn't write a single word about Batak food, whatever that would be. I'm not sure. I'm not a specialist on Batak food at all. But it can be everything. I mean, Indonesian food, and what is Indonesian food? I mean, Indonesia is also an enormous country, of course. It is, I would say, it's so huge. If you look at the diversity of food in Indonesia, it is amazing. It is amazing. But what is stressed is the fact that it comes from Indonesia. And I think that's right. I mean, the nationalist thing is here very important.
There is sentiment, yeah.
Yeah. But on the other hand, they go to a food stall run by people from South Thailand. And this isn't thematized at all. So they say, well, this is Indonesian food, yes, but it's prepared by people from South Thailand. So between quotation marks, how authentic is this? If you're so concerned about authentic Indonesian food, I mean, who is allowed to prepare this food? Only Indonesians? Can only Indonesians make proper Indonesian food, or also outsiders can they do that? That's not thematized at all. The importance is we Indonesians, when we go to another country, we want to have Indonesian food. It's very much a nationalistic topic. Yeah. And I also think that it has to do with the very short period that people stay in a place. You can very well imagine that if you only go for a week to a foreign country, why should you adapt? Why? I mean,
But as well in the big cities here, as I've seen, the major cities, especially now, the food here is diverse.
That's right.
And especially the Japanese and Korean cuisine here is very famous in Indonesia.
Yeah, that's true.
Also I realized some steak houses.
Yes, that's true.
And when I'm looking in the malls, the 99% in Jakarta or Depok, 99% are locals.
That's right. That's right. Also, a restaurant from Thailand and Vietnam, but that's a quite recent phenomenon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then indeed, this is a non-mainstream issue. That is not discussed much by current scholars. That's why it is and insightful presentations. I just like to draw attention on the first comics. And I agree strongly with you that the comic was very popular during, and it was the golden era of comics during the New Order era.
Yeah.
But I suspect popularity depends on certain segment.
Yes.
Because like core comics that you just presented probably was popular for certain segment of society.
Yeah.
Like myself.
Yeah.
And also some other people, they would like to read much Mahabharata and Ramayana.
Okay.
Written and drawn by N. Akosasing.
Yeah, I know.
And some other people.
Yes.
And probably it is supposed to be included in your presentation, in your article that certain type of comics are popular for certain segment of society.
I agree. I agree. Yeah.
Now, the second one, can you go to your last slide in your presentation? Last slide.
Last slide. Okay. Okay, last slide.
So basically, not all comics about core comics during suatu era, but there are different types of comics.
This is my last slide. Yeah.
Now, the second one is about your assumption or your argument that those comics represent useful safety valve.
Yes.
For Indonesian community.
Yes.
To let up some
Yes.
the big one.
Yes.
If you go to this kind of assumption,
yes,
probably, and it is specifically directed to Northern era, probably not quite accurate because that kind of comic does not only appear during modern era, but in early years of reform.
That's true.
In the form of Hidayah magazine. Yeah. You can see Hidayah magazine between 2013 and 2014.
Okay, yeah.
And certainly Hidayah magazine, it was not about letting off some steam without, or it was not giving voice to social or political frustration without harming the government, because I underline without harming the government, because at the time during the reform era the government was free. We were in the era of freedom. So basically different era. So probably if it is going to be more beneficial for you if you look at before you are going to make those kind of assumptions or arguments, you need to look at publishers or people who write or who draw that comics, and then you understand their motive. Okay, those just my comments, and then again, thank you for your interesting and insightful presentations.
Thank you very much for your comments, and I totally agree with you. But there's also a problem of lack of research. I mean, if you say, well, you have to look at the publishers, the writers, why did they do that? Why did they do that? I don't have information on that. I mean, I don't have sources from publishers. I don't even know biographical details of writers or even of the people who made the illustrations. There's nothing. Perhaps there is in Indonesia. There are also, I know, collectors, but that would involve a lot of more research on my part, which I am to blame, of course. That's true. But that's one point. The second point, you're right. I mean, but I do not completely agree with you, if I may, because I think it doesn't mean that the same comics cannot have a different function in another era. And I think my hypothesis is such. Why are these comics, which were very popular during the final years of the New Order regime, were they allowed to appear? Because you also know that during the New Order there was a very strict censorship. And so I came to the hypothesis, well, this is because this was a way for the authoritarian government to give the critical voices a possibility to let off steam. And this could only be done in a religious lexicon. But you're right, I mean, the same comics in another area could have a completely other function. I'm with you on that. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more hand raiser. Please introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Islamic. I'm a political science student. So my question is, actually, from your book, let's say, Quran Bata.
The
point you mentioned. Indonesia are going to Mecca, and they find Quran Thailand, or Thai people are selling Indonesian food. So this is kind of globalization, as we can say or accept.
True.
But my question is here: is globalization going to bring threat to the originality or authenticity of the Indonesian food or Indonesian cuisine? Because I've been living in Indonesia almost 5 years.
Yes.
I would like to eat Indonesian food somehow, and if I want to cook, I can never cook better than an Indonesian.
Yeah, you should get a wife.
So I can never cook as an Indonesian. However, I can cook something and I can say like, okay, this is Indonesian food. So guys, so is it going to bring a threat to the originality of these nations?
Thank you, Ashikil. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's also a very good point you're raising there about the originality of food, and also who is allowed to do this. I would say, what about fusion, for example? That you say you also have this phenomenon, right? I mean, that people say, well, we mix different styles, but there are also people who say, well, you should never do that. It is cultural appropriation and what not. Now, what I was trying to emphasize here was something different. I mean, in all these descriptions from Indonesians, it is very much says that they want to have Indonesian food. But on the other hand, if you look at it, they buy it from people who are not Indonesian. And I was thinking, hey, doesn't that raise a question in their minds? Apparently not. So that's, I think, an intriguing thing. I can't answer for that, but the people from Patani are making apparently a very good living in Mecca by selling food which they sell as Indonesian food. And I also think that the food from Patani is, I think, I'm not an expert, although I'm a lover of Indonesian and Malay food, but I think the people from Patani would be more inclined to have what you would call a Malay kitchen, right? Patani is more associated to Malaysia, yeah, rather than Indonesia. No. Tertarik. No. Mufabak, yeah.
So yeah, the last question kind of like you said.
Yeah. Originality, yeah.
There is the kind of contrary sense.
Yes. Yeah.
When you become global,
Yeah.
does it mean that you can be less nationalized
Yep.
as a citizen?
Yeah.
So this kind of idea
Yeah.
tested, people do research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Also, I think also a certain anxiety. Who am I in a global world? I mean, you are in another part of the world, which is not your country. So perhaps you tend to be more about to think about who am I, and I'm an Indonesian, so I would do this and that. Yeah.
Let's go to the can be.
Yeah.
Who am I? Okay, we have two more questions.
Oh.
And
Okay.
then follow that.
Okay.
Environment for me, it's also related to that period.
Probably.
Yeah, you showing me again some of the comics
Yes.
that I also read during that time.
I think so.
So,
Yeah.
Six up, different thing, you know.
So, but please tell me about it. What did you think about it? Yeah.
But my point is
Yeah.
that, well, you mentioned that
Yeah.
Indonesia also having a problem in corruption,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's
So
amazing.
might be that Seksa Kubur related to
Yeah.
corruption, we need to bring it again, you know, anti-corruption. So that's number one. And number two, I just would like to remind that
Yeah.
during the end of Suharto's era,
Yeah.
there was also, even though it is not about Islam,
Uh-huh.
but there is also publication
Yeah.
that indirectly provide a critics to Suharto's era, especially
Yeah.
like the publication of Mati Ketawa Cara Rusia. You know, there was a book that was published in, if I'm not misunderstood, in 1986 and was being Gus Dur, Abdurrahman Wahid was write the introductory for the book. It is,
Which book was that?
this is the book about a joke on Russia.
Okay, judulnya, title is?
Mati Ketawa
Oh, Mati Ketawa.
Cara Rusia.
Oh, okay,
You know?
Mati.
And
Ketawa.
the book was very famous, you know,
Yeah.
because so the book was actually there are a joke oppressive
Yeah.
regime,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but it is not talking about Indonesia,
course.
but talking about
I see.
Soviet Union or Russia, you know.
Indirect.
Yeah.
Yeah, indirect.
So
Yeah, yeah.
I think that kind of comparative perspective is also interesting to be put into the discourse
Thank you very much.
of domestic ideas of that
Yeah.
funny stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very helpful comment. I mean, what do you do if you have an authoritarian regime? And I think that's a good way to do it indirectly. And this would be, yeah, it's a very good example. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Barty. We look for the last one. Akbar. Oh, somebody from Qatar. No? Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Should not be careless about it.
Uh-huh.
And also like what Imam Ali says about those who are not brother in faith, they should brother in humanity. Now we are talking about the pilgrimage.
Yeah.
From the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they are using this pilgrimage not just about how do they care about the Muslims, their war. In 2030, they will have like a Ru'yatu Isrin wa Salasin, the vision of 2030. In the projection of the economy from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
In the past, we will talk about how the Muslim from the other country come to the Saudi Arabia and become of the pilgrimage and all.
Yeah.
And what should Muslim do about the future? For the future in the Saudi Arabia, because the Saudi Arabia, when we base on this kind of the notion from the Imam Ali and also the Qada Usul Fiqh about doing kind things, not to just Muslim but to other ones like the non-Muslim, to the Christianity, to those who are like encouraged tourism when they come to Saudi Arabia. What will Muslim do? Because this is kind of the future globalization that actually all world collaborate with Saudi Arabia to make things not just pilgrims, but also the tourism sector.
Thank you. Thank you. It's kind of out of the today, but if you want to take it,
I can try to comment upon it, not giving a solution in any way, but we are facing, of course, major problems in the upcoming years. There is a population explosion. I mean, we're talking about millions of people who want to perform the Hajj, and the numbers go up and go up and go up. And you also emphasize that the Saudi government has economic interest in the pilgrimage, which is of course true. So there's also a lot of criticism from Islamic circles about the loss of spirituality of the pilgrimage. That they say, well, this is becoming more and more of a tourist phenomenon rather than the fulfillment of the fifth pillar. And the Hajj is promoted and with 5-star hotels, etc. What is really important that you have a comfortable period. You can stay in a 5-star hotel, or are there other you find important? But also in Indonesia, I mean, there are long waiting lists in Indonesia. I was told that people nowadays have to wait for about 25 years. Yeah?
Yeah.
25 years. 30, yeah?
Almost 50.
It's amazing.
50 years.
Yeah. And I also know that the Indonesian government is again and again trying to get numbers up, right? I mean, that they say, well, the quotum should be augmented, but it's a major issue. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
okay, thank you. Just want to check out. Do you have one more question? One last. From girls. No? Okay. That's kind of going to the old type of jokes.
Yeah.
You shouldn't call that one. No. Today's generation. Any girls want to ask? Because we get sensitive.
That's very sensitive. It's very sensitive. Yeah, it's very sensitive. Yeah.
Okay, so by that last question from Akbar, we close our program for today. So thank you so much. Can we do one more? So before we go, do you want to have some kind of photo? Then can we, if you have some more discussion to do with Prof. Edwin, you may, or I think it's better to send email.
Oh yeah, okay. That's good. That's good.
Ask if
Yeah,
you
okay.
have some more questions.
Of course.
So yeah, because of the time.
That's good.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yes, finished. We survived. Huh? Okay, thank you. Baik, baik, oke. Ya. Tapi harus foto dulu ya. Foto dulu ya, jangan lupa. Yang paling penting. Ya, mari.
29 tahun untuk regular haji.
Ya.
Waktu tunggunya.
Hah?
29 tahun waktu tunggu untuk regular haji.
Ya.
Tapi 6 tahun untuk premium haji.
Oh, premium aja. Ya.
Untuk haji mungkin sekitar 1 juta rupiah.
Lah, premium ya.
Selama 6 tahun.
Ya. Ya. Oh, saya dulu.
Silakan. Mari kita
Is it? Why is it just?
Ya.
Is sitting good?
Ya.
What is it? That's funny.
Ya.
Bebas?
Oh.
Bebas ya, di mana
Oke.
coba?
Ya, saya juga nggak tahu bagaimana bebas ya.
Oh, thank you. Itu lah, ngomong gini tuh.
2, 3.
Iya.
Oh, kasih. Ya.
ini dapat dan
Oh ya. Oh, Pak Oman ya, kenal saja ya, kenal. Baik. Oh, baik. Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah.